I was 17 when this happened, and to this day, the memory still makes me uneasy. Back then, I was one of those teenagers who liked to mess around on Omegle whenever boredom struck. I'd seen hundreds of so-called Omegle horror stories on YouTube, but I always thought they were exaggerated. I didn't think anything bad could actually happen through a random chat site. That was my mistake. It was a rainy Thursday evening. My homework was due the next morning, but I decided to take a small break and go on Omegle for a few minutes. The idea was simple: act goofy, talk to random strangers, and maybe scare a few people for fun. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just some late-night entertainment. After a few harmless chats, I was paired with a man whose webcam was already on. He was older, maybe in his 30s, with a pale face and eyes that seemed too wide open. His expression didn't change when I typed, "Hey." He just kept staring at me through the screen. I laughed and said, "Dude, blink or something." He didn't. Instead, he typed, "Talk." I ignored him and kept quiet, figuring I'd annoy him by not responding. Then he typed again, "If you don't talk, I'll find you." That line made me laugh nervously. I typed back, "Sure you will." He tilted his head slightly, his lips twitching into what looked like a smile. Then he said out loud, in a deep, flat tone that my speakers distorted slightly, "You should talk more." I felt a weird chill and quickly disconnected. For a second, I thought about how strange that was, but I brushed it off as some creep trying to scare people online. I shut down the tab and went back to my homework, like nothing had happened. Maybe 15 minutes passed before my dogs started barking outside. It wasn't unusual, but this time they wouldn't stop. I shouted their names through the window, but they just kept going crazy. I figured maybe a raccoon or stray cat had wandered into the yard. I calmed them down, locked the back door, and sat back down at my desk. Then came a knock. Not the front door, the back one. That made my heart drop. The back door was behind a locked gate, and the only way someone could reach it was by climbing a 4-foot fence or having a key. I froze for a few seconds, trying to convince myself that it must have been the wind. But the knock came again, 3 short taps this time. I grabbed a flashlight and peered through the curtain, but there was nobody. My heart was thumping so hard that my hands shook. I stayed by the window for 10 full minutes, scanning the dark yard, until I convinced myself it was nothing. I called my dad just to be safe and told him what happened. He sounded half asleep and said he'd check around the house when he got home from work. That made me feel a bit better. About 30 minutes later, the barking started again, louder this time, desperate. I yelled at the dogs, but they didn't stop. That's when I heard a thump against the door. It wasn't a knock this time. It sounded like someone had thrown something heavy. I turned on the porch light and stepped closer. Lying on the ground was a small rock with a piece of paper wrapped around it. I opened the door slowly and picked it up, my pulse racing. My dogs were pacing along the fence, growling toward the driveway. I unwrapped the note and saw the words written in thick, uneven black marker. "I know where you live." I felt my stomach twist. I dropped the note and locked every single door and window in the house. Then I called my dad again, my voice shaking. He said he was already on his way home and told me to stay inside with the dogs. I remember sitting there in the corner of my room, the flashlight in one hand and my phone in the other, waiting for the sound of his car to pull into the driveway. When he finally got home, he searched the yard with a flashlight, but didn't find anything. No footprints, no strangers, no one nearby. He said it was probably some local kids trying to prank me. I nodded, but deep down I knew it wasn't that. The message felt personal. It felt like whoever had sent it knew me. That night I couldn't sleep. Every little sound made me jump. I kept seeing the face of that man from Omegle, his wide, staring eyes, and that slow, eerie smile. My brain tried to tell me it was just a coincidence, but my gut said otherwise. The next few days went by without incident, but I couldn't bring myself to go back on Omegle. I stopped answering random messages online, deleted my account, and even changed my Wi-Fi name and passwords. I didn't tell my friends because I knew they'd just make jokes about it, but the part that still makes my blood run cold happened 2 weeks later. I was leaving for school early in the morning when I noticed something on the front gate. A small folded paper wedged between the bars. I opened it. It said only one word: bark. That was the last time I ever went on Omegle. I was 15 when my parents decided to spend the weekend visiting my uncle, who lived 2 hours away. At first, they insisted I should go with them, but I begged them to let me stay home. My best friend Alex lived nearby, and we had already planned a gaming night we didn't want to cancel. After a long debate, they finally agreed on one strict condition: no parties, no guests except Alex, and I had to answer every call they made. When they left that afternoon, the house felt strangely quiet. For a while, I wandered from room to room, feeling both free and a little nervous. Alex showed up right before sunset, carrying a backpack full of snacks, a few horror movies, and his gaming controller. By evening, the living room was a mess of empty soda cans, pizza boxes, and laughter echoing through the house. Everything felt light and harmless. Around midnight, after hours of gaming, Alex suggested we try something different. Omegle. He'd been on the site before, talking to random strangers for fun. I wasn't too sure. The idea of faceless people appearing on screen in the dark felt unsettling. But Alex convinced me, saying we might meet someone interesting or just prank a few weirdos. At first, the screen showed random strangers, old men, teenagers, and people skipping in seconds. It was boring until 2 girls appeared on the chat. They looked around our age, maybe 16 or 17, sitting in a dimly lit bedroom. Both were smiling, but their eyes didn't seem to match their expressions. They said they were from our city and were also bored at home. We started chatting, and soon they asked if we wanted to hang out in person. Alex got excited immediately. He asked where they lived, but they avoided giving details. Instead, one of them typed, "We can come to the park near the playground." We know it. It was the park only 10 minutes from my house. Alex was already grabbing his jacket before I could even respond. Something about it felt wrong. I told him it was stupid to meet strangers at midnight, especially people we just met online. But Alex brushed it off. saying it was just for fun, and that we wouldn't even get close if anything felt sketchy. After a few minutes of arguing, I gave in. I didn't want him to go alone. We messaged the girls back, saying we'd meet them at the playground. They sent a smiley face and wrote, "We'll be waiting." The night outside was colder than I expected. The streets were empty, the only sound being the rustle of leaves in the wind. The park lights flickered weakly, and the swing set creaked every few seconds, as if someone had been there moments before. But when we arrived, the place was empty. No girls, no laughter, nothing. We called out once, then twice. Silence. Alex took out his phone to message them, but before he could type, I noticed something. There was a man standing near the trees. He wasn't moving, just watching. His figure was tall, shoulders stiff, his face half hidden in the shadows. At first, I thought it might be a late-night jogger, or maybe a drunk. But when I whispered to Alex, the man tilted his head slightly, like he'd heard us. My stomach tightened. Alex, still thinking it was a prank, shouted, "Hey, you seen two girls around here?" The man didn't answer. He just stepped forward, slowly. We both started backing up. My heart was racing so fast I could hear it pounding in my ears. The man's face became visible under the flickering streetlight. It was expressionless, eyes wide, and fixed directly on me. There was something unnatural about the way he moved, like every step took effort, but no sound. Then, out of nowhere, Alex's phone buzzed. A new Snapchat notification. AnnexOxo99. "We see you." He froze. "What the hell?" he whispered. That was the moment the man lunged. We ran. Hard. The path out of the park seemed miles away. I could hear heavy footsteps behind us, faster, closer. I turned once and saw his arm reach out. His hand brushed my sleeve and I screamed. He caught my wrist, fingers like iron. I struggled, shouting for Alex, but he was already ahead, sprinting toward the gate. The man's grip tightened, his face twisted, as if angry that I'd called for help. Then, sirens. Blue and red lights flashed from the street. A police car slowed near the park entrance. The man released me instantly and vanished into the darkness between the trees. The officers found me trembling on the ground, trying to breathe. They took me home and called my parents, who drove back that same night. When they arrived, I couldn't even speak properly. I just kept saying, he was there. He was real. The police searched the park for hours but found no trace. No footprints, no jacket, nothing. The only strange thing they noticed was a phone lying near the swings. Its screen shattered, battery dead. No SIM card inside. Later, Alex showed me his phone. The Snapchat account, AnnexOxo99, was gone. Deleted. Vanished as if it had never existed. Even now, years later, I still see that shadow when I close my eyes. Every time I pass that park, the swing creaks in the wind. And for a split second, I swear, someone's still watching. When I was a child, my mother used to tell me never to look into a mirror in a dark room. She said mirrors can hold reflections that don't belong to this world. And if you stare too long, something might stare back. I always thought it was just one of those superstitions parents make up to keep kids from scaring themselves at night. I wish I still believed that. It happened during my college years. I had moved into a small rented house near the outskirts of the city. Cheap rent, quiet neighborhood, and enough space for a student like me. The place was old, but not haunted looking, at least not at first glance. The previous owner had left behind some furniture, including a large antique mirror in the hallway. It was the kind of mirror that looked expensive once, but now had cracks running across its frame. I thought it gave the place a bit of character. The first few nights were peaceful. I studied late, watched horror movies, and enjoyed the freedom of living alone. But around the fifth night, I noticed something odd. Every time I passed the hallway mirror after midnight, I'd catch a faint shadow behind my reflection, like someone was standing a few feet behind me. I turned around several times, but there was never anyone there. I assumed it was just my tired eyes or the dim lighting. I even joked to myself, guess I'm starring in my own ghost story. Then one evening, while I was brushing my teeth, I heard a soft creaking sound from the hallway. I peeked out and saw the mirror swaying slightly, even though no wind could reach that spot. I shrugged it off, finished brushing, and went to bed. But just as I was about to fall asleep, I heard a whisper, so faint it could have been the wind. Still, it came from the hallway. It sounded like someone saying my name. I froze, every nerve in my body alert. "Hello," I called out. No answer. The whisper stopped. I eventually convinced myself it was just my imagination and forced myself to sleep. The next morning I noticed fingerprints on the mirror, long, thin ones, almost like someone had pressed their hand against the glass from the inside. I wiped it down, laughing nervously. Creepy, but maybe I did that without realizing. That night I stayed up late working on an assignment. Around 2 a.m., my laptop battery died, and I got up to plug it in. As I walked through the hallway, I caught a glimpse of movement in the mirror again. Only this time, the reflection didn't match mine. When I lifted my arm, the reflection stayed still. When I stepped closer, it smiled. I stumbled backward, my pulse racing, trying to tell myself it was a trick of the light. But then the reflection began to tilt its head, not like a normal movement, but slowly, jerkily, as if the neck bones were cracking with each shift. And that grin, it stretched wider than any human mouth could. I ran into my room, slammed the door shut, and stayed there until morning. I didn't sleep a second. The first rays of sunlight made the house feel safe again, but something inside me knew the comfort wouldn't last. I covered the mirror with a sheet and decided to move out within the week. The following evening, while packing, I heard the mirror knock. It wasn't loud, but it was deliberate. 3 sharp taps from behind the fabric. I froze where I stood, staring at the covered shape. My instincts screamed to leave, but curiosity, stupid, reckless curiosity, made me lift a corner of the sheet. What I saw still haunts me. The reflection was no longer mine. It was me, but not me. Pale, hollow-eyed, with a dark smear running down its neck like dried blood. It mimicked my movements again for a second, then stopped, and reached toward the inside of the glass. The surface rippled like water disturbed by wind. I dropped the sheet and ran. I slept in my car that night and never stepped foot in that house again. When the landlord called to ask why I'd left suddenly, I told him about the mirror. He sighed almost knowingly and said, "You're not the first tenant to complain about that mirror. It belonged to the original owner's wife. She died standing right in front of it." He paused before adding quietly, "We've tried moving it. Every time it ends up back in that hallway the next morning." That was 3 years ago. Last month, while scrolling through a local marketplace app, I saw a listing for an antique hallway mirror. The photo showed the same cracked frame, and though I know it sounds impossible, I could swear that in the reflection, just barely, someone was standing there.